So one of the things that will matter, although everybody's expectations have been raised, and I think that the menu of possible proposals has been enlarged because of the events of the last week. There will still have to be negotiation, and overall, there will still have to be work done to ensure that the people buy into the ultimate product, and that is a long-term process, right? And so the goal is to increase interest and faith in the ultimate document that is created, and so that the popular political energies of the parties, as Professor Zilla mentioned before, the interests of the people at the local level, as Professor Vergara mentioned before, are channeled into this new document and the institutions that are created, rather than siphon off into more destructive areas. So what about legitimacy? Well, the traditions and culture of Chile will be important. For example, you might think that because there is an unpopular president and unpopular administration at the moment, there could not be a better time to revisit, for example, questions of presidential power. This is something that is of interest to me, could be of interest to many other people. But how far people are willing to go in the revisiting of presidential power will raise these questions of tradition and culture. Do the people want to stay with a presidentialist system, or are they willing to even imagine a very different kind of an order, right? A move towards a more of a parliamentary order. Even under the current presidential system, the president still has strong power to declare war, certainly within existing laws and with consultation. But the president still retains constitutional authority to declare states of emergency and to take powerful actions to suppress speech and activism. And these are things that should be part of the conversation, I think. You know, I think that there are really two ways of thinking about stability. One is, of course, having institutions that work. This is what we've been talking about. Institutions that remove these choke points and formally allow stakeholders across the country to be able to broadly participate. This is how you incentivize, of course, people to act in constructive ways rather than to engage in destructive ways. But I think the ultimate test of stability, of course, is how well it's doing solving the present needs of the people. And of course, we know that in Chile, you know, a quarter of the wealth is in the hands of about 1% of the population. The tremendous problem of income and wealth inequality, which is not just Chile's problem, but the problem of the United States and many other countries, has been shown to be a future that is dissolving existing constitutional arrangements and damaging the civic culture that may have once been robust. And so I think that's the ultimate test of stability, is what can be done to ameliorate those conditions, but also to continue to promote the kind of economic growth that will keep important stakeholders as part of the constitutional project and not disown it. That's going to be very destructive if that were to happen. A lot of people are invested in creating more social rights, economic rights, you know, rights to healthcare. I think this is a very important part of the conversation, but it's also important to realize that the codification of rights is only worth the energy. It's only worth it insofar as the rights are useful for future mobilization. Because otherwise, a lot of energy is spent on squabbling over the actual writing of the document, the words that appear in the Constitution, and the risk becomes quite great that they become no more than parchment barriers, because the real work that will have to be done by the civic groups and the people in the streets and the elites who are involved is what comes after the Constitution is written, right? All of the civic engagement that will happen later has to be, it will answer the substantive and detailed questions of what kind of proposals will actually be effective. that's where the truly hard work will be done. And we don't want a constitution writing process that depletes everybody's energies and interests, leaving only those who are already powerful to be engaged in the hard work that comes later. There are certainly rights where improvements in those domains because of the particular nature of the right. So let's think about individual rights to equality, so sex and gender equality. There's language, of course, in the existing Chilean constitution preserving the life of the unborn, and this has been seen by many people as a potential choke point to sex and gender equality. So if you deal with that language in some way to make sure that that's not an obstacle to sex equality, to access to reproductive autonomy, for example, that's an area where, because of the nature of the right, changing something about what the Constitution says can more predictably lead to something beneficial in, for example, the work of judges and so forth. But there are other kinds of rights that I think, because of the nature of the rights, would be very different. So, there's been a lot of discussion about environmental rights, and the language of rights has been very important to mobilization in that area. But because of the nature of environmental rights, it's so open-ended and vague, and it also touches so many domains of social, economic, and political organization, that the articulation of some kind of an environmental right, even if you're very specific, is far less likely to do much just by virtue of being in a constitution. That's an example of something where everything depends on what happens later, right? How judges read that language, how whether ordinary people sit on their laurels, or whether they take that new language and mobilize themselves and push towards concrete proposals. Healthcare is another example, right, where people have spent a lot of energy trying to put a guarantee of the right to healthcare in constitutions. And there is some value to that, again, insofar as it might be helpful in future mobilization and in future efforts to focus attention on specific proposals, but not if what it does is it gets people to think that they can sit back and that somehow judges are going to do that work, because judges will never do that work. Judges are by nature elites who are part of an elite political culture, and they are by disposition and training conservatizing figures. They are not activists. They will never be activists, even those who come from some kind of activist background. And so I think that what I would say is it's very important to break the link that many people have in their minds between the language in constitutions and this image of judges somehow. This is a huge problem in the United States, for example, this myth of judges as heroic figures, because of the culture, because of the training, because of the very nature of politics and what judges do. That's impossible most of the time, unless you're in a very, very strange historical moment. There have been times when judges can be very helpful, but they're very rarely at the vanguard.